All right, welcome back. In this video, I want to walk you through everything you need to know about Section 8 rental, the good, the bad, the ugly. Who is this meant for? Who should not even dabble into Section 8? How do you get paid? What are the things that can go wrong with the tenant? Among other things, that's what I'll be walking you through in this video. This is a lot of information. I want you to slow down and take notes and eventually decide if Section 8 rental is for you or it's not for you. Let's get to it. All right, this one is about Section 8, and I will be walking you through the housing choice voucher, or what a lot of you call Section 8. What is it all about? Who is this meant for? I'll be walking you through how to evaluate a voucher tenant without confusing a stable property or a stable payment with a guaranteed profit. What are the differences and what you should know? You want to verify their payments, make sure their payment standard will actually meet what you are willing to take for your property. You want to also make sure you check the rent reasonableness and, of course, confirm with the local PHA. PHA means Public Housing Agency or Public Housing Authority, typically the county, or who is providing that voucher to that tenant. I'll walk you all through that. Once you verify that, then you want to move to the next step, which is you now screen the tenant. I'll walk you through everything you need to know how to screen a tenant, what you should do, what you should not do more. Also, you want to confirm this tenant actually meets your standard, except for their income and their credits, but every other thing, they should still check your standard. Also, no shortcuts. I'll walk you through it and more of it as well. Also, how do you protect yourself? How do you budget for inspection? How do you budget for vacancy repairs? And how do you navigate all the bureaucracy that comes with renting to Section 8 or any kind of housing assistant tenants? By the end of this video, you will definitely understand that voucher tenant can work for you, or maybe it cannot work for you, but I will let you know what system you need to have in place. You understand the program fully, you understand the pros and cons, and again, decide if it's meant for you or not. What the public housing agency pay, how the tenant will pay you, is the tenant even allowed to pay some part of the rent payments, and also what the landlord need to do in order to be able to sign a contract with the housing authority. Also, what you can control and what you cannot control, you will understand that at the end of this video. You also know how to verify if the voucher amount they are paying you actually even makes sense for you, how to look at it by the zip code before you even engage that tenant, the payment standard, what they call the rent reasonableness. You understand their inspection process, you understand some local rules and regulation, and also you understand if managing a Section 8 tenant is what you want to do, or maybe you'll be hiring a property manager. How you avoid any rookie mistake, I'll walk you through as well, because I see a lot of new investors jumping into Section 8 without proper education. That will not be you, because you are going through this course. Also, you will be understanding what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to Section 8 rental. All right, let's get to it. You understand the program basic, the deal analysis, tenant and property checks, and go or no go decision. You'll be able to make that decision. What does it actually mean? It means housing choice voucher, or again, aka Section 8. This is a program that is administered locally through some local government or local organization, typically through the council or your city municipal office, something like that. For example, here we have 2 or 3 of them in the major city of Houston. We have Harris County Housing Authority, which is Harris County. We have the Houston Housing Authority, which is for the city of Houston. I'm sure their other city also have their own, and also there's Montgomery County Housing Authority, there's Galveston Housing Authority, Galveston County Authority. So it's typically administered by the county. So also, tenants chooses the housing, and voucher holder can search for private market housing that meets the program rules and their situation and the amount they've been approved for. PHA administer the program. The PHA is a public housing agency, like your county. They're the one that administer it. It's typically through the local public housing authority. They handle the tenant eligibility, they handle the inspection, they handle the rent reasonableness. I will tell you what that means in later talking point. And also, they will prepare the HAP contract, which is housing agreement payment. That's a contract between the landlord and the local organization that is administering the voucher program to that tenant. Also, landlords still manage the property. Of course, you have to manage your property, or you hire a property manager to manage it for you. You still need to screen tenant for suitability. You still want to enforce your lease rules and regulation. You still want to maintain your property if you're renting to any market tenant. And also, you want to manage your operation effectively, just the way you do it with any tenant. This housing authority, or call it Section 8, is all about. Do not parties' job, because you want to know which parties are involved, what is their job, and what is your own responsibility. The first one is the tenant. Without the tenant, you cannot even do Section 8. You need to get a tenant. The tenant must apply to your property, and of course to the Section 8 program. They must select a unit they want, which is your house. They must have been approved by the program. Of course, they must have their voucher at hand. From there, you will now be able to sign a lease agreement with them. Sometimes they allow them to pay their own portion of the rents, but sometimes they don't allow them because they've approved them based on the maximum amount they think they can afford, or they think that they should be going after. Sometimes maybe you are renting your property for $4,000 and the Section 8 tenant voucher is only $2,500. So you might think that the tenant will pay the $1,500 difference, but sometimes they just say, no, you cannot do that, because you cannot charge them, because if you're doing that, you're putting financial pressure on them. And the housing authority already understand that they cannot afford it. That's why they've maxed them to $2,500. Now, even if you do that, if that tenant stop paying you, you cannot really enforce it, because the housing already told you the maximum they can pay. And of course, there's a legal implication to that as well. They can kick you out of the program because you are simply collecting money from the tenant, which is not allowed by the program, except you sign that with the housing authority that Jessica Smith is allowed to pay $1,500 as part of their own separate payment, and the housing authority will pay $2,500. Now you get your $4,000. That is how it works. If you don't sign that with the contract with the housing authority or the people that are administering the Section 8 program, you may be violating their rules and they can kick you out of the program. This next person is you, of course. You are the owner of the property. You complete what they call the RFTA, request for tenant approval. You will be the one to maintain your property, or you hire a property manager, or you designate somebody to do that for you. Of course, you are the one that will sign lease agreement with the tenant, and you're also going to sign the HAP contract, Housing Authority Program contract, between you and the county that is administering the voucher to the tenant. Of course, there is now the PHA. They are the one that will now verify the eligibility of that tenant, eligibility of you, the landlord, and eligibility of the property. Those are the three things they look. Again, means public housing agency. They are the agency. Typically, your county are the one that are administering, or your city office, your city municipal office, something like that, the one that are administering this voucher. Now, of course, they are the one that will now also send their inspector to inspect the property to make sure that it checks, what they want to see in a property. Make sure they check it for safety. They check it for livability or habitability. They also check it for any mold issue, among other things that they will check. They have a checklist that they normally run a property through to make sure that the property will be safe, the person that will be living there. Very, very important. They also check for something very, very important. They call it rent reasonableness. This is how to check if you are not overcharging for your property. Let's say similar houses in your neighborhood are renting for $2,300, but you are trying to rent that property at $2,700 to a tenant simply because they are Section 8, because they think you are taking advantage of them. That's probably how they see it. And of course, most of the time they will kick it back. They will force you to accept that $2,300, or they say you cannot rent that property to that tenant. Of course, you can walk away. It's your property. Nobody will tell you what to do with it, but they might not approve you or approve that tenant. Again, you might go ahead and agree with the tenant with a separate agreement that, Jessica, I want to give you my house. They will only pay me $2,300, but I want to rent it for $2,700. Will you be paying me the $400 difference? If Jessica agree, sometimes you can do that, but 9 out of 10 times is a violation of the Section 8 program rules and regulation. Now, you want to understand your golden ticket versus nightmare. Both stories can be true depending on your own execution. Very important. I've seen a lot of Section 8 that go wrong. I've also heard a lot of good reports or good feedback on Section 8 landlord. As at the time of making this video, I do own about, I think, 6 or 7 Section 8 tenants in my property as well. So I'm talking from experience, and I've had my own good experience. I've had some that didn't totally go as I planned, or some that wasted my time. As I'm talking to you, I'm even dealing with one Section 8 property I'm trying to rent, and they kick back my property because they said it did not pass the Section 8 reasonableness. I'm trying to rent it for 3,200. Imagine what Section 8 said they will pay for it. They said it's 2,248, which is almost $1,000 less than what I'm willing to take. So, of course, I did not agree to move forward with that tenant. The property is now back online. I'm now looking for another tenant. Eventually, I may not go Section 8 route with that property. I may just go with a conventional, tenant that qualified, that can pay for the rent. But if I find a Section 8 tenant that is qualified, and I carefully verify that that rent reasonableness is going to be approved by the housing authority, of course, I will go ahead and take that Section 8 tenant. So you want to understand why investors like Section 8 program. I'll get to it for you. And also why some investors just hate it. Some investors will like the program because it's present them a stable income every single month. They know that the government always pay, the county always pay. It also presents a strong demand in their market. Maybe there's no so many landlord that is renting to Section 8 tenants, and they are willing to do that. They know that that's an opportunity for them to constantly get tenant for their property. Also, most Section 8 tenant will stay in the property longer because the process is very tedious, it's very lengthy, it's time consuming for both the landlord and the tenant. So once the tenant successfully gets approved and move into a property, they tend to stay longer, except something happen that they have to move, except you are not taking care of your property. That is when a Section 8 tenant can move out of your property and go look for another one. But they tend to stay longer. An average Section 8 tenant will stay in a property for about 6 years. That is what I have seen. That's what I've heard. And that is what experience I've also been experiencing in some of my property as well. So of course, you want to make sure it's a good match for you and the tenant. If that tenant is not good, even though you want to do Section 8, don't do it. All right, why investor hates it? Inspection is very tedious. They can fail your inspection for very minor things, but it's minor to you. It's minor to someone like us, but it's big to the Section 8 housing agency. They believe that is a big one. Most of the time, people fail inspection because of smoke detector, because of carbon monoxide detector is not present in the property. I have failed Section inspection 3 different times simply because of smoke detector. Also, another common one is the latches on the door. They want to have, if your property is on a keypad, they want to make sure there is a latch at the back of the property. So if anybody open with the keypad, they cannot just get into the house. There's something that will stop them, meaning that they want to make sure both the front door and the back door are well secure. Also, the leasing process is very, very slow. And again, these are county employees. These are, they work at their own pace. They don't work at our pace. Unfortunately, they will take their own sweet time. And of course, there's a way you can push it a little bit, but as much as you like to push, they still will tell you it will take between 60 days to 90 days to approve a tenant or to go through the process. If you're not okay with that, don't rent to Section 8, go rent to a regular tenant. But if you look at waiting for 3 months and that tenant staying in your property for the next 6 to 7 years, it might worth it on the long run because you're still going to lose those time during your turnover anyway. Turnover simply means a tenant a tenant is moving out of your property. Maybe they stay there for 1 year or 2 years. Now you have to clean the property, get it ready for the next tenant to move in. You also have to market it online. You have to advertise, screen that tenant again. If you look at time, you probably would lose that 2 to 3 months anyway. So some people just made up their mind, I'm going to be vacant for the next 3 months. I need to go through this Section 8 program and suck it in and just go through the program and approve a tenant into your property. And now your property is stable for the next couple of years. So also the paperwork can be very lengthy. They pick on very minor things. They can say that you check this box, you should have checked that box, something like that. But just prepare your mind properly if that's what you want to do. Repair requirements are also sometimes required because they do inspection every single year. They do annual inspection just to make sure the property is still safe and is still in compliance with the Section 8 rules and regulation, especially on the safety aspect. Also, there is going to be local delays in terms of public holidays, and other stuff that might happen. Also, tenant selection is also a problem. Why some people just don't like Section 8, because they think that the quality of the tenants are poor. And I'm not going to fault them for that, because most of the people that are qualifying for Section 8, they are low-income people, they are elderly people that need assistance in one fashion or the other. So they will have a low credit score. Sometimes they don't have a job. Sometimes they have a job, but they are earning below minimum wage, or they just have some, disability issues or any family issue that just cause them that they are just not making good money. Their credit is also not good, but it doesn't replace the other screening aspect that you should be screening a tenant for. But they will not have good credit, and they may also not have good income. But sometimes you find one that have a good credit, maybe 650 credit score and above. Those are very rare to find. Of course, they will also be looking for nicer property, but they will still not have a good income, because they cannot even qualify for the Section 8 program if they are making good income. And good income is very subjective and is very relative to your own market. Somebody making $5,000 in some markets might be, hey, you can't qualify because you make $5,000, because we know you can easily rent a one-bedroom apartment for $1,000 in your market. And in some markets, for example, in New York, maybe, or even San Francisco, California, they might be making $10,000 in a month, and they may still qualify for Section 8, because $10,000 might not be able to get them a house. Maybe they will be renting for around $5,000. Among other reasons why people just think that Section 8 tenants are not quality tenant for them. So when voucher rental can make sense for you, this strategy fits best when property and process support itself. If the property does not support it, or your own risk tolerance, or your goal doesn't just support it, it may not make sense for you. So when you have a solid rental pocket, that is, or a working, a blue collar kind of people, rental area, but they have some pride of ownership, and there's a huge demand for Section 8 rental, that might make sense for you. Also, if you're an experienced local operator, about rental property investing, and you're willing to try Section 8, or you've done it in the past, or a friend that is doing it, or a family member that is crushing it with Section 8, it might make sense for you to try it as well. Or you have a property manager that is already understand how to manage Section 8 rental. Maybe they have a couple of them as well. It might be a good idea to try Section 8 rental. Or you also made up your mind that, hey, we're going to fix everything that inspector is finding on my property every single year, because I want to be a good landlord anyway. A good landlord should be fixing things on their property. They should not allow it to pile up. At that point, they call it a slum. Slumlord is a landlord or a property owner that don't take care of their property in terms of repair. They leave everything in disrepair. They let it go bad, and of course it's more expensive once the issue escalates. So of course, maybe you also have an experience about the process of Section 8, which is why a lot of people don't even do it, because they don't have the time, or they don't take the time to educate themselves about the process. How does it work? What is their requirement? What should I do? How do I prepare myself? How do I prepare my house? What should I be looking for in a tenant? And that's why they don't do it. But luckily for you, you are here and you are going through this, and you're going to be, a smart, Section 8 landlord if you choose to do it after watching this and taking action on this training video. All right. Maybe also there is a conservative math. Maybe you are the property works after vacancy for you. Maybe the repairs still, even when you do the repair, it still makes sense. Even with all the inspection hassle and the delay and the management, it still makes sense for you. Maybe even with the high maintenance assumption that you think that you will be doing on that property, it still makes sense to do Section 8. Then do it. Now, when Section 8 does not make sense, and when they can be dangerous for you, if you have a cheap property plus assisted rent, can become a trap. Some people will go and buy a cheap property of $60,000, and I hear this on social media all the time. I see it all the time. Hey, you can buy a $50,000 property in Detroit, Michigan, or Gary, Indiana, or some part of Ohio, and you rent for $1,000, and they will tell you it's like the return is crazy because you bought a property of $50,000 and it's renting for $1,000. Nice. And it draws a lot of people that are looking for cheap, barrier to entry, or easy or low barrier to entry into real estate. And those people would you would drove them, or you want them to such markets. They buy a property of $50,000 and it's renting for $1,000, but the property is crap. Appreciation is zero. The tenant quality are going to be headache. And sometimes these people will trash their property simply because there is no pride of ownership. that location is just not good, but they are attracted to it because of the numbers, which again, as an investor, you should look at the number, but number should not be the only thing you look at. So if the property is not good and you are looking for a cheap property to put a tenant in there, sometimes it doesn't work for you because you are chasing the yield. You are just looking for low price strategy to hold multiple doors. It's just sometimes doesn't work. And also the management is always very, very terrible because you're managing people that really don't care about your property. Also, if you skip screening the tenants, this will not work for you. A voucher order does not tell you the resident will treat your property because they are Section 8 voucher order. It means you should still screen them as you will screen a regular tenant, but just be lenient or be gentle with your credit score requirement and your income requirement. Those are the only two things. Apart from that, I will still screen them with everything else: background check, eviction, criminal issue, all those things. I will still check them to make sure they are good people, but they're just not making enough money or don't have a good credit. Also, you understand the budget repair. Inspection and heavier use can expose problem you did not price for. So Section 8 can be dangerous at that point. Also, when you rely on one person, you do not trust only the seller or just one agent. Of course, you should trust your agent, but still verify. You want to verify independently. So don't trust every information they're giving you blindly. You want to verify on your own. If you don't do that, Section 8 can be dangerous for you. All right, well, the benefit of Section 8, just in recap, I've already mentioned some of them to you. The big one is the payment. Payment is very stable. The benefit is real, but not also limited. PHA, which is Public Housing Agency, portion can be very reliable, and 9.9% out of time, they are reliable. Whatever agreements they sign with you, whatever rent amount they agree to, they always pay. By 1st or 2nd of every single month, I always receive the Section 8 payment in my bank account, because that is what I'm looking for. I need that stability. I need somebody to stay in my property longer, and I want to be getting the income without chasing down that tenant. Sometimes it could mean you are getting maybe $100 less or $200 less than what the fair market rent is. Now, you might sacrifice that for that stability, for that consistent payment. But if that's not you, then scratch it. Section 8 may not be for you. Maybe you need the cash flow. Maybe you need that money for some other reason in your life. So, all right, tenant portion still matters as well, right? Some tenants may pay part of the rent. The portion must still be collected and enforced. So if Section 8 program that tenant is or that renter is into, if they allow that tenant to pay their portion, you want to make sure that tenant is paying their portion as much as possible. The most easiest one and more reliable one is to get a Section 8 tenant that the housing authority is paying 100% of the rent. So that way you don't even have to go after the tenant for any payment, because they might not be making good money. They have told you they are not financially responsible. They have a low credit score. They don't make enough money. Some of them even have collection on their record. So it doesn't make sense, or it's not a wise idea to have a tenant pay their own portion, because again, it's just more risk. Now, even if they don't pay that portion, you might not be able to evict them because the housing authority are still paying their own portion. You see where it can become tricky. So for me, I just like tenant to pay 100% of it. If tenant will pay anything, maybe less than $200, so that in case I don't even get $200 from that tenant, I will not sweat about it. I will not be, my life will not be upside down because that tenant did not pay their $200 portion. So that's how you should think as well. It will help you a lot. All right, payment is not profit. Rent collected still has to survive all your expenses. It has to survive your maintenance buffer. It has to survive your vacancy projection. Now, vacancy is less when you are renting to Section 8 because one of the biggest things is that they stay there longer. Also, you want to budget for repair. You want to also have an emergency reserve should you need to fix something quickly, because if there's an emergency issue or they do their annual inspection and they ask you to fix some things and you don't fix them on time, they can hold down to your payments. They might not pay you, the next month's rent until it's fixed. Now, if you don't fix it by 2nd month, now it's 2 months, no rent pay. You can see how it can linger like that. Now, of course, when you fix it, if the tenant is still living in your property, they can pay you in arrear, but you really don't want them to be holding down your money based on repair that you did not fix. All right, here are the biggest myths that I've seen in Section 8. Guarantee rent does not mean guarantee cash flow. Because you are getting a guarantee rent every month doesn't mean that property will cash flow. You still need to carefully analyze it and make sure that overall situation matches your own expectation and your buy box. So you still have vacancy. Sometimes they move out maybe after 1 year, 2 years, but historically or based on history, based on data, an average Section 8 tenant will stay there for 6 years, which is good for most of us. All right, so you want to make sure that you go through the approval process, the inspection process, anything that is needed, you still need to fix it. And also the lease up can also take some time. That's also, some of these are myths because people think that you have a lot of vacancy is less, but inspection, repair, lease up can take some time. It's partly myth and it's partly true. If you have prepared yourself, if you have properly prepared yourself that it would take 3 months to get a tenant in it and it happened for you in 2 months, you'll be fine. But it's because people are expecting it to happen within 2 weeks, which is wrong. That's the wrong expectation. Trying to rent to a Section 8 tenant, it's not going to be 2 weeks. At least budget for 90 days. That way, if it happens in 60 days, you're good. But if it's now more than 90 days, that's when you can, weigh your options, and maybe you're going to terminate the program and just, move on with a regular tenant. You still have repairs. Yes, it's the biggest myth. People think that if you put a Section 8 tenant in your property, you do not have to fix anything in your property anymore. No, you still have to fix it because they do annual inspection and you have to still take care of the property, especially if it has to do with safety issue. Another myth is that you still need, they think you don't need a reserve. Once I rent my property to a Section 8 tenant, I don't need any reserve. You do need a reserve because, again, I just walk you through a situation whereby if something is got damaged and you don't fix it on time, they can hold on to your rent payment. All right, let's look at the voucher deal math. You want to underwrite the property more conservatively than a normal market rent. If that is your approach, if that is your strategy from day one, I'm buying this property, I will be renting it to a Section 8 tenant, then you want to underwrite or analyze the property a little bit conservative when it comes to your rent amount you can collect. So let's say the market rent for that property is 2,500. You might want to be underwriting it or analyzing it. Underwrite and analyze means the same thing. You might want to analyze it for 2,300, which is $200 less than what the market rent is supposed to be. So use payment standard. Also use rent reasonableness, not whatever the seller is promising you or what they are telling you it will rent for. Vacancy, you want to add a time for the RFTA process. You want to have some time for inspection. You want to have some time for you to correct whatever they ask you to correct. And you also want to add some time for you to properly set up yourself and the property with the housing authority agency. Very, very important. Also repair. You want to make sure that your repairs, are very conservative, but have a place for repair, have a place for still your normal capex, have a place for your turnover assumption, even though your turnover will be very little here, because if you have screened that tenant properly, they should stay in your property for at least 3 to 4 years, at least. So also management, right? You want to include your property management fee if you are hiring a property manager. Even if you're not hiring a property manager, I would throw in that 8%. You also had the leasing fee. Maybe the tenants have an agent representing them, or maybe you are even hiring an agent to help you rent the property. So include lease up fee or leasing fee in your rental analysis. Also put maybe $2 or $3 for inspection, because you might need to do, sometimes they have a Section 8 inspector that you can even hire on your own to go and help you look at your property to make sure it passed Section 8 inspection before the actual Section 8 inspector comes. So you can do that as well. So payment standard are not a blank check. They vary by location, very important. You want to check your local PHA payment standard, and they pay by zip code and they pay by bedroom size. So please pay attention to that. I understand where your property fall into, and does it even make sense for you to rent to Section 8, or you should just go with a regular, tenant that is not a Section 8 tenant. Also, they affect subsidy. Payment standard help determine the housing assistance amount. Sometimes they subsidize, some people make some money, but they don't make enough money to be able to, to be rent on their own, so they might get their rent subsidized by Section 8. Section 8 is paying some parts, and why they're also paying some parts. So that's what that means. They are not the final rent approval. The PHA will still review the rent reasonableness for the unit. I just mentioned to you the one that they kick back simply because they just think that the rent is too high for what I'm charging, or the tenant cannot just afford it. So, and of course, I have to move on from that tenant, and I didn't rent to that tenant. All right, rent reasonableness. This is where sellers projection can get you into trouble. So don't trust whatever the seller is telling you. Just take it with a grain of salt, but go and verify on your own. So PHA compare the rents. They will look at the rents that similar properties in your area, in your property area you're trying to rent, are renting for, and they will be able to use that to determine what they call rent reasonableness. Rent reasonableness. How reasonable is your rent? That's what I mean. The rent request can be reduced. Yes, that just happened to me, and it has happened to a lot of people I know. You might be trying to rent your property for $3,000, maybe, but they're only going to pay $2,400. So it can be reduced, and at that point, you have to make your decision if you want to continue with that tenant or you move on to the next one. Very, very important. Now, you want to verify this if your goal is Section 8 rental, that's your ideal tenant you want to rent to, or that's your customer you are targeting, or your tenant profile you are targeting. Then you want to verify what Section 8 will even pay for that property before you buy it. That's what you should be doing in your analysis. So instead of you using the regular market comps, you'll be using the Section 8 rental comps. So ask your property manager, ask your real estate agent, and also go to the website, the PHA website. They always have a website to check for rent reasonableness before you close on that property. Very, very important. All right, no side deal. Do not let a resident or the tenant offer extra rent outside of the approved lease. I've discussed this with you before. Rent control the lease, because the PHA approved the lease and you what they call app contract. App contract is what they call it. That's the contract between you and housing authority administering the program to that tenant. That is what governs the lease agreement. You cannot charge anything extra from the tenant except is clearly stated in that app contract. So side payment creates risk for you, because if the tenant stop paying the extra amount, enforcement may be impossible or improper, or it might even be a big issue for you. Imagine you sign a 2-year lease, tenants and you give app contract, you sign, say the rent is $2,400, but you and the tenant agree with $300 extra by the side. Now, 2 months into moving to that property, that tenant stopped paying that, $300 they're supposed to pay. Now you cannot collect that $300 for the next, how many months? For the next 20 months or 22 months before that lease expired. That's 300 times 22 months. You can know how much you are losing, because you cannot really enforce it. Even if you escalate it, you probably will get yourself into trouble, because they will interpret or they will refer you back to the app contract you signed. You just violated our rule. You should not agree with side payment or extra payment with the tenant, because we did not mention that, or we did not agree to that with the app contract you signed. So take note of that. Very, very important. It can create compliance problem, which I just mentioned. Do not risk the program, the lease, or your legal position, because sometimes they will kick you out of the program easily because they see that you are just not trying to comply with their program. You are not a good fit. You are a bad landlord. You are not working in an ethical manner. They might just say, we don't want you in the program. They kick you out. Sometimes they can even fine you for what you did. So please pay attention and pay careful attention to it and act accordingly. You do not have to rent to Section 8 tenants. It's just an option for you if you're looking for stability in terms of income, stability in terms of tenants staying in your property longer, stability in terms of tenants not asking you too much, because most Section 8 tenants, they don't really ask too much from the landlord. Provided your house is also reasonably in a good condition, they don't trouble you too much. But if you're looking for the big bulk and you really want to maximize everything you can get on your property, Section 8 might not be the right best fit for you, because there's a lot of checks and balance. There's a lot of gates you have to pass through. And if you are doing something that doesn't pass through that gate, they will kick you back. So understand that as well. All right. You want to make sure that your number works for you before you even accept that Section 8 tenant. If the approved rent is too low, or you just don't like the amount, you can pass on it or try to negotiate with the housing authority. If they will increase the amount, if they don't increase the amount, move on with another tenant that their voucher will cover what you're asking for. Or if it's still going to be the same issue, then I would probably just not rent that property to Section 8 tenant, except you are okay with renting it low because of other benefits that you know you will get. All right, let's talk about the lease-up process. Move in order. Please don't skip this. This is very important. Do not shortcut the paperwork. Again, there's a lot of gates. There's a lot of approval gates that you have to go through for your property to be approved to be rented to a Section 8 voucher holder. And if you skip it, they will send it back to you again, or they will refer you back to it. So you don't want to skip it. Number one is the contract. You have a local contract, PHA. PHA again means Public Housing Agency. You have to understand their process. You want to understand the forms. What do they mean? You want to understand their inspection timing. You want to understand how to use their website and the portal and the landlord portal. You also want to understand the things they require from you as a landlord before you agree or before you even, on renting to Section 8. So that is the step number one for you. Step number two will now be to screen the voucher applicant. Of course, you'll have advertised your property online, then have that applicant see your property, and they now reach out to you. You now screen them. And you do this by making them to apply. Once they apply, you will now check them for everything else except their credit and income, but still make sure they are good people. They have not been evicted before. They don't have any criminal background that will pose risk to your property or to your other resident if this is an apartment complex. So you want to check. Now you want to now run them through the PHA screening eligibility to make sure their voucher amount actually qualify for your property, because maybe they are again paying them. They are only going to be paying 2,300 for that property, but your house, it should be renting for 2,600. You might want to quickly pass on that tenant because they don't just meet your rent, because you know that you can get somebody else that will qualify for 2,600, provided your rent has been priced reasonably, is not overpriced, or you just don't pull the number out of thin air. You want to make sure you can justify that number. Also, you still need to screen the tenant for suitability under your written criteria, under your rules and regulations. If they don't pass it, I'll move on to the next person. The number three thing you should now do is, now once you approve that tenant, you now want to submit what we call RFTA, request for tenant approval. You want to send this out. It's very lengthy. Sometimes it can be like 20 pages long. And they have a bunch of things they want you to do there. This includes your property details, the tenant details, how much you are renting it, how much you are asking for, what is the condition of your property, who is paying all the utilities. Also, they will ask you to upload your deed or your title to show that you are the owner of the property. There's also a lead-based addendum if your property was built before 1978. Among other things, they will ask you for from them. If you ask you to fill out your W-9 for them to be able to be pay you, because at the end of the year, they will send you a 1099 that, hey, we pay you X amount of money on this property, which you can now send to your CPA and file your taxes. So they will ask you to also attach a void check. So it's a very detailed form. It protects you, it protects the tenant, and it protects the housing authority as well. So it becomes part of the HAP contract that you sign. So that is the next step. From there, if everything looks good and they approve your property for rent reasonableness, they approve the tenant, they will now schedule for inspection. That is step 4. Step 4 is they will now schedule your property for inspection. Now, between the time you submit your RFTA and inspection, it might be 45 days, sometimes it might even be 60 days. This is where the waiting game actually starts. RFTA. Once you submit your RFTA, that is when the waiting game starts. So hopefully you pass inspection. Once you pass the inspection, they will now finally approve that tenant and approve your property. They will now prepare what they call the app contract, and for your signature, you will sign it and you send it back to them. This is when you now rent to the tenant. And from there, they will also, in the app contract, they will mention the move-in date. That is, the tenant cannot move in date until that date. If the tenant move in on the app contract, they will not pay you for the time that the tenant was there without the signed contract, before the signed contractual date, before the date they say moving date. Very important. Now, if you have a tenant move into your property and they don't eventually get approved, now you are in trouble, because how do you get that tenant out? So don't do that. Always make sure a tenant move into your property after you have signed the HAP contract, and that you know that the tenant has been fully approved, and do not let them move in before the moving date on the HAP contract. Very, very important. And of course, you cannot even get payment without the HAP contract completed. So until you complete the HAP contract, that is when they can start paying you. All right, these are timeline reality. I want you to really understand, make peace with it. If you are not okay with the timeline, Section 8 is not for you, because you're going to wait a long time. At least budget 90 days from you advertising your property online to a tenant moving into your property. At least if you can do 4 months, which is 120 days, it might be better, but 90 days is very realistic in most markets, except you are dealing with a market, everybody there is just Section 8 tenant, which I don't think will be the case. So the clock is different from regular tenants. You should definitely know that. It will take you 90 to 120 days. And also tenants, there are some things that are even beyond the tenant's control themselves. They want to move in ASAP, but the process will take their own time. Hence, they cannot move in. You want them to move in ASAP so you can start collecting your rent, but you cannot do that, because if you do that, you might be in trouble and you might just, do the process the wrong way. So these are the timeline reality check you should, keep in mind. Approval takes time. PHA review, rent reasonableness, inspection, correction of any items that they want you to correct, and also there could be delay in moving. The one I dealt with last time was the tenant wanted to move in, the HAP contract, everything was gone in, and we signed everything, but the tenant cannot move in because she previous landlord that she will move out by May 30th, which is the end of May, and I've signed the HAP contract and everything with her says beginning of April. So she couldn't move in by May 1st, even though that's what the HAP contract is supposed to say. They have to end the HAP contract to say June 1st. So I lost about 2 months rent because the previous landlord would not release her to go till, the time that she gave elapsed, because that landlord also wants to get paid, which I understand. So guess who has to suck in the vacancy? That's me. But I took in that tenant because I see the long-term picture. I see what will happen if that tenant stay in my property for the next 6 years. I know how much I will have saved. I know how much I will have made. I know how much headache I will have avoided, and how much of turnover I will have dealt with. Because six years in my property, it's a lot of money somebody will have made. It's a lot of stability that you achieve on that property. So also understand that now vacancy buffer matters as well. You need to analyze or underwrite your property and include some vacancy that is longer. So if you have been analyzing property with 8% vacancy, you might want to analyze it with around 12 to 14% vacancy in this matter, because it might take you there. Or just put it at 16% vacancy, assuming that your property will be vacant for 2 months in a year, in 12 months. So you only be rented for 10 months in a year. So which again is just too conservative, but if that makes you sleep at night, please do it. Paperwork can slow the payment down. Very important. Do not assume money hits your bank accounts and immediately after they move in. What they typically do is that they will not even pay the first month they move in. For example, the tenant I mentioned, she moved in June 1st. I don't get paid for June, and I will not get paid for June. I'll get paid for June and July, the first week of June, right? So that way they typically will pay you 2 months together. So if they move in May, you don't get paid for May, you get paid for May and June together. So again, budget accordingly. Make sure you can still continue to pay your mortgage. If you cannot afford that, or you don't have that, bandwidth or that reserve, then Section 8 is not for you. Inspection readiness. The property must meet minimum quality and safety standard required by Section 8. Safety is very important. Smoke detector, the staircase, the railing, the electrical hazard. You must secure everything and secure the entrance and backyard door. Very important. Habitability. If there's any plumbing issue, any heating issue like AC not working or it's not working well, if water supply is really slow, or if there's no proper water supply, if there's any issue that just proves that property is not habitable, or the kitchen is not functioning properly, or you don't provide refrigerator and microwave, something like that, they can just say, hey, this house is not habitable, and they can fail inspection. Also, the structure. This one is very important, and this is definitely applicable for any kind of tenant, regardless if it's Section 8 or not. Your structure, I'm talking about your roof, your walls, the window, the doors, the floors, interior, and the air quality are very important. If there is a wobbling, flooring, and all that, it's not going to pass inspection. Also, your property condition, trash, pest control, exterior hazard. What are the things that can make this property not safe for people or not habitable? They will fail inspection because of that. Now, there are some things you can do before the inspection for you to be a good landlord or a ready to go Section 8 landlord. You can definitely prepare yourself. So if you do this, what I'm about to walk you through before your inspection date on your property, you will be fine. 9 out of 10 times you will pass inspection. You want to walk the property in the lens of an inspector. How would they see your property? Because typically they give you some inspection lists, some inspection items, what they will be looking at. The Section 8 Housing Authority can easily provide that to you. And it's also readily available on most of their websites. If it's not available, please ask them, hey, I know you have inspection on my property in 2 weeks' time or next week. What are the things you're looking for? And they will send it to you. And typically when they are even scheduling that inspection dates, right? When they send you an email, they always attach this same checklist in that email, or they will list it on the body of the email so that you can look at them and quickly go and walk your property to make sure that you have all this thing done, so that there is no surprises. You already know what they're going to be inspecting. So go fix it if it's not fixed before the inspection time. So they will test for the window. They will look at the outlets, your electrical outlets. They will look for the doors. They will look for smoke detector. Very important. They will check the heat and the cooling of the property. They will check the water. They will check the toilet. They will check all appliances, and they will check all the locks. Make sure they are working. Super important. Now, and you check all these things for what they will be looking for. The next thing is to fix any obvious items that is not working. Maybe there is a tripping hazard you saw. Maybe there is a leak issue in the kitchen sink. Maybe there is a missing smoke detector. Replace it. Maybe there is no carbon monoxide detector. Replace it. Maybe the window is broken. Fix it. Maybe you see a lot of peeling paints that they can see as an hazard. Fix it. Maybe the door is not properly latching. Please fix it. If you fix all these things and they come, you should be fine. The next thing, of course, you want to now document everything. Before the inspection, you want to make sure that you have some pictures, you have some repairs, invoice of some repairs you've done. If you need your contractor, it's also a good time to get your contractor into that property before the inspection date. So ongoing inspection as well, this is something you should be aware of when it comes to Section 8. Approval is not a one time and done. There is always going to be re-inspection every time. Now, typically is annually, the PHA must inspect the assisted unit and as needed. Typically, they do annual inspection. But sometimes if a tenant complains that something is not working in your property and they complain to the housing authority, they can schedule an inspection, and they will give you typically maybe a week for you to address that issue. Hopefully you address it before the inspection date. Even when you say you address it, they can ask you for picture. Sometimes the picture might suffice and they don't come for the inspection. And of course, they verify with the tenant. If they say it's fixed, they can scratch the inspection. But sometimes they don't believe you, especially if you have history of not fixing problem. Then they will come for that inspection and make sure they check what the tenant has complained about, and make sure that and if it's not, they're going to hold on to your rents. All right, the next thing that will be happening on an ongoing basis is that if there's any deficiencies in your property, they will come and check it. Very, very important. So some repair may need correction within a required time frame. Maybe they give you a week or 2 weeks to fix it. And once you say you fix it, again, send them picture, you should be fine. If you don't fix it, they will come and check it, or the tenants still complain again, they will come back. People are living in the property. Be a good and responsible landlord and fix issue as quickly as you can, regardless if it's a Section 8 tenant or not. And you don't want to be a bad landlord that is notorious for not fixing issues in the property, because that will affect your future property you are trying to rent to Section 8. I hope you're not just buying one property and go to sleep. That's you, that you want to buy multiple properties, then you need to maintain your reputation as a Section 8 landlord, because if they keep reporting that you don't fix issue, they will now be coming to your property with already preconceived conclusion that person doesn't fit their property, we know it's going to fail inspection anyway, and you can see yourself failing inspection time. Also, this is going to be an ongoing inspection. You should budget accordingly, because inspection repair are part of the strategy that you should have, as a part of the rental analysis you should have budget for, not a surprise. Maintenance budget rule. Voucher rentals need stronger repair assumption. More inspection pressure on you sometimes if you buy a holder property. That's why I really don't recommend you buy a super hold property, especially if you're going to be doing Section 8 rental, because it might just not pass inspection easily and you have to start fixing things upon things. So small issues can become mandatory repair for you before they approve that property for the tenant to move in. Potentially more wears and tear. If you deal with some not so good tenants, you can have more wear and tear on your property because maybe they are just not financially responsible. And that's why I will still check and review that tenant. Typically, what you can do is to go and see their previous house where they are currently living right now before they move into your own. If they have maintained that one very well, there's a higher probability that you also maintain your own very well. But if they have not maintained it very well, that can even be a decision saying like, hey, I'm not comfortable with what I saw. Sorry, you are not approved for my property. Because if they maltreated somebody's houses or they trash somebody's house, there's a higher probability they're going to trash your own property as well. All right, you also want to have a higher reserve target, like I mentioned, because again, water heater might break. They might just think it's not working and they might make you to replace it, even if you don't want to replace it. Next thing you should check for is the neighborhood fit. The block matters than the address of the property. Look for pride of ownership. Look for clean yard, maintain home, stable streets, normal activities. They look for that as well in what they are doing. Also, you should be looking for it before you buy that property. Buy a property in a good area. Long story short, either you will rent to Section 8 or not Section 8, because some people think Section 8 tenants, low life people, and they only deserve a crappy house. No, even when you think like that, the program will filter out your property and your thinking. So buy a good property in a desirable neighborhood, or at least a Class B or Class C neighborhood. It doesn't have to be Class A. Of course, there are Section 8 tenants in Class A. I do have Section 8 tenants in a Class A property in a Class A neighborhood, because what you also see is that you're now going to deal with more educated, more literate, and more well-behaved tenants, because they are also trying to live in a good place. They want their kids to go to the good schools. Even though they don't make good money, they want a better life for their kids. So don't just think you have to be buying all the cheap properties simply because your strategy is going to be Section 8 rental. That is a wrong way to go. You also want to avoid cheap property trap. Like I mentioned to you, a boarded window, a bond structure, a terrible blocks, or very unkept property is not going to fly. Now, you want to ask your property manager and your agent and ask them, will you manage this exact property address I'm looking to buy? If they say no, they will not manage it, I will pass it, move on to the next one. Do not chase the Class D property, please. Cheap property can become expensive for you on the long term. As I mentioned to you, low price hide a lot of risk, like repair, like tenant issue, like crime, vacancy, also management problem, because it's not safe, or they know they are going to be buying themselves a lot of headache. So they can say, no, we cannot manage that property for you. And again, if the property manager said they will not manage that property for you, please do not buy it. Now, voucher rent is not a cure. Assisted rent cannot fix a bad property for you. So don't trap yourself into buying property simply because you'll be doing Section 8 and that property is weak. Don't buy it. First timer need a safer execution. Better to pay for more on a workable property than gambling on a cheap property that nobody wants to live in. So if a first timer going through Section 8, please have a new construction or relatively new house, or a property that you have done inspection on and everything on that inspection report has been fixed. That'll be a property you should be trying to rent to a Section 8 tenant, not a property that even you just don't feel safe in the neighborhood. Of course, you want to verify local demand, so don't chase a Class D property. That is the summary of this one. Now, property manager fit. For this strategy, the manager really matters. If they say they will not manage the property, move on to the next one. If they don't understand about anything that has to do with Section 8 paperwork, inspection, rent increase, everything that has to do with Section 8, then don't hire that property manager to manage your property. Also, they must know the demand in that area. Tenant demand, very important. Maybe the way you're trying to buy Section 8 property, there is no even Section 8 tenant. Don't make that mistake. Talk to a property manager or talk to a local, your real estate agent. That will save you a lot of headache. Also, they know the repair standard that is needed to be done in order for you to qualify for your property to be approved as a Section 8. So here are a few questions you should ask them. Ask the manager before you buy that property, would you manage this property? If they say no, pass it. What is the realistic rent for this property? They should be able to tell you. Will one or fail the inspection on this property? They should be able to tell you as well. If they are experienced rental property manager for Section 8 in that neighborhood, they should easily tell you, because they will know what the inspector always look for. And if they don't know, they can easily get it, by the way. So if they don't know it, I will just pass that property manager. Also ask them, what is the realistic timeline it would take me to successfully market and rent my property to a Section 8 tenant in this neighborhood, more specifically this area, in this neighborhood. Also, tenant screening rule, the voucher does not screen how tenants will treat your property for you. So you want to have your own rules and regulation. Use the same process that you have written down to screen everybody. The application, the rental history, eviction history, background issue. Also call their landlord to confirm how good was this tenant when they were staying at your property. If that landlord says something negative about them, I would dig deeper and say, hey, based on what you've said, are you going to rent to this tenant? If for any reason they come back to you, and if they said no, they will not rent to them, I will pass on that tenant. I will not rent tenant. Also verify their prior rental behavior. Like I just mentioned to you, call their landlord and get information from them, because that will give you a lot of clue if only you are willing to be bold enough to call the prior landlord. Document the decision that you make, so that way they don't say you are discriminating them. So make sure you document your final decision, or what the prior landlord said that led you to your decision as well. So screening focus area, do not just let any assisted rental get into your head or think that is going to weaken your standard. No, you still need to uphold your standard. The only two things that you should be a little bit gentle about is the rental income, is their income that they make on their job, and also their score. Those are the two things that you can not really be too strict with, because they don't make a lot of money. That's why they qualify for Section 8 in the first place. And of course, their credit score might also be low. So look for rental history. Would the prior landlord rent to them again? Ask that. Did they damage the property? Are they owing them any money? Or did they even violate any part of the house or any part of the lease agreement? Maybe the landlord did not approve a pet, but they brought in the pet into the house. Maybe the landlord did not approve smoking. Maybe they smoke in the house. Those are the things you want to ask from the prior landlord. Eviction history, check for any filing, any judgment. Them. Now, if there is an eviction on them, I probably not take them, because they're already a higher risk already. Okay, another area you need to screen that tenant is the eviction history. Make sure that they have not been evicted recently. If they've been evicted recently, I probably would not approve them. But if they've been evicted maybe like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that might take less impact as compared to a fresh eviction on them. Of course, make sure their background check is clear, no legal issue. They have been responsible, person, and there is no any violence issue or no any kind of criminal issue on their background. Please, you have to avoid a lazy blanket or a lazy approach here. This is if someone stay your property for a long time, so you want to make sure you do your due diligence on them and make sure you are comfortable with their overall situation, except the credit and finances. That's the only two things that you can be less relaxed on, but the rest you have to uphold them. Very important. The next thing you should definitely screen them for is the tenant's portion readiness. If they pay part of the rent, you want to verify the ability to pay that, to make that payment. Again, I really don't recommend this a lot, except that you just don't have a choice, that you like that tenant, everything is good, and you are comfortable taking that risk that the tenant will be paying a portion of their rent to you every single month. Now, it must be approved by the housing authority as well. If it's not approved, I will probably not do it. And if you have to do it, just know you are taking a risk. But what if they stop paying you? That will be on you. All right. Previous landlord call, I mentioned this to you again. This is where lazy screen actually gets expensive. Call their previous landlord, verify their personalities or their behavior with the prior landlord, get a reference from them. Say, hey, are you going to give a reference to this Jessica Smith that was previously living in your property? And if they say yes, then that means Jessica Smith is probably a good tenant as at the time he or she was living with the property in that property. So if they said no, I will not give her a reference, then obviously you can make your decision from there. Also, ask for their behavior, ask for their compliance with things, ask for them properly maintaining their property, and ask for any other issues, lease violation, among other things. You should ask them. And of course, ask them a killer question. Would you rent to this person again? If they say no, don't rent to them. If they say yes, you want to dig deeper. All right, resident quality matters as well. I've mentioned this to you multiple times. A great resident can still make your strategy to become weak, or it can make you like a genius landlord, even though you are not experienced with landlording, but because you did some of those things I've walked you through, you can definitely, pick a good tenant that will stay in your property for longer without damaging your property. So good residents protect your property, as you already know. Bad resident will destroy your return and destroy your property and give you a lot of headache. That's why you want to screen responsibly. Very important. All right, the next one is paperwork and bureaucracy. When you are renting to Section 8 or housing voucher holders, there is going to be a lot of paperwork. There is going to be some bureaucracy for you to navigate and overcome. It is one of the reasons why some landlords just don't like to rent to Section 8, because of the paperwork, because of the time it's involved to actually get approved. Be prepared and make sure that you're ready for it. If you're not ready for it, scratch Section 8, move on to rent to a regular tenant. So this is the part that a lot of people don't like. Again, so every PHA is different. Every public housing authority is different. So you want to understand what is applicable in your home market or the market where you are looking to accept a Section 8. Some are very organized, some are very slow, some are really, really willing to help you, and some of them they really don't care because it doesn't affect their salary. So you have to understand who you're dealing with. Now, you can build relationship with them. You can build rapport with them to see how they can help you move your file forward a lot quicker. If they are willing to, help you in that manner, I would not say no to that. You want to track every document, your RFTA, the date that you submitted it, and all the things they are asking for. Make sure that you check, look at what they're asking for, and don't skip anything. If you skip anything, it will just delay the process, and they might even kick it back that you should redo it again. So check for lease agreement, check for the tenancy addendum that they put in the RFTA. Make sure that whenever you receive your HAP contracts, you review and you sign it quickly. Also, if they send you any email for inspection, make sure you quickly reply to them and get them access to us to inspect your property. Now, if you are local, you can attend the inspection. It doesn't change anything. Either you're there or you're not there, they will still do their job and they will pass it or fail it accordingly. But if you are there, maybe you have extra smoke detector with you. Maybe you have extra smoke detector with you. You can hold your smoke detector and you can easily replace it. And from there, you can pass inspection. But if you're not there, if you're out of state, your property manager will be doing this for you. Very easy. It's part of what they do. Now, they may charge you for maybe $50, $70 for that inspection for your property manager to be there. But it's something you can discuss with them. Also, expect follow-up. You want to check the online portal for anything that they are asking from you. You want to reply to any email, any request as quickly as possible, because the more you delay to respond, you're just adding to the 90 days wait period anyway. So you want to be on top of it, reply to them quickly, set up your payment online properly. If you have any question, call them. Also, some of them are not very responsive. They might not really pick up your call. They might not reply to your email for 2-3 days. Again, these are the frustrations, unfortunately, we have to go through. But maybe you're lucky in your home market, they are different or they are responsive right there. Now, the next thing you should know is a rent increase. Do not assume automatic annual rent increase. PHA rules control the timing that you can increase your rent and by how much you can increase it. So your local PHA process may require a notice before you even increase your rent. They may require you to fill out a form. They may require an inspection before they even allow you to increase your rent. So rent reasonableness still apply again, because even though they've been there for 2 years, it doesn't mean you can just increase your rent by $200. It could be like, hey, you can only increase by $50. Again, you still have to make that decision. Of course, even though they've been living in your property, if you think the rent has gone up drastically and the Section 8 is not willing to increase it, you do not have to renew that tenant lease agreement if they don't want to do it. Unfortunately, it might create some temporary vacancy for you. It might create a discomfort for the tenant because they might have to move out. and go and start the process all over again, looking for another landlord that will approve them. But unfortunately, as an investor, you still have to watch out for yourself, because there's no point losing $200 on a property when you know for sure you can easily get that money. Also, you want to build it into your underwriting that, hey, I might not be able to be increasing my rent every single year. Sometimes I might only be able to increase it by $50. So pay attention to that. Make sure you are making your decision accordingly. All right. You want to always have a conservative underwriting input. Very important. Building a buffer for you on the vacancy. Add extra 1 or 2 months for vacancy. Put a repair buffer. Also, some administrative time delay that will take the Section 8 to approve you. Of course, you want to stress test your deal, analyze the property again, do some conservative rent, use some conservative repair that may happen. If it still makes sense for you and you understand the full picture of Section 8 rental, being a Section 8 landlord, obviously go ahead and approve that tenant. Also, tenant occupy voucher deal. This is applicable if you're buying a tenant, a property that is occupied by a Section 8 tenant. You want to review their lease agreement, and you want to review the HAP contract that current landlord has sent to you. You want to understand that existing payment, because they are paying on time, does not waive all the due diligence for you to still do on that tenant, that property. So review it very carefully. Review the payment history of the housing, and if the tenant is responsible for paying some part of the payment, make sure the tenant is also paying as well. Look for late payment pattern. Look for any subsidy or any balance that the tenant is owing, or any kind of reduction that the current landlord is giving to that tenant, and make sure you are okay with it. If you're not okay with it, you do not have to approve that tenant. Also, you want to review the property condition as well, because they will be doing inspection on your property once you close on that property. So you might want to have the current landlord, which is the current seller, to fix any problem before you close on the property. All right, let's talk about the out-of-state voucher investing. You need a stronger verification if you are investing from distance, especially for Section 8. The very important key member you will need right here is your property manager, if you have one. But if you are doing it by yourself, if you are following everything I've been discussing here, it doesn't matter your distance or your location, provided you have access to internet and you can reply to your email on time. You can be a Section 8 landlord from anywhere. So you want to visit the property if you want to. You don't have to, but if you have a good agent, or you have someone that can visit the property for you just to see what you're buying, especially if it's currently tenant occupied, that is a Section 8 tenant. You want to verify everything they are giving you. Drive to the area, speak to local, interview the tenant you're about to become their landlord of, and see if you like their vibe or not. Do not trust any cheap inventory they are giving you, any low price or any high voucher rent they are giving you. Make sure that you can justify that once the lease expires, and I'm trying to renew this rent, what will be my new amount I should be charging for this property? Also, your manager must know the program in and out. If you're hiring a property manager and you want to do Section 8, if they don't have experience with Section 8, I probably will not even hire them, because they will not be a good fit for your situation. Here are a few red flags you should look out for. Pause, slow down when you see something like this. Number one, the PHA rent, which is Public Housing Authority or Public Housing Agency rent, is unverified. If you cannot verify the rent, I would not rent to that tenant. I would just skip that property, move on, if it's currently occupied by Section 8 tenants, because seller projection can sometimes be wrong. They might tell you will rent for X, but it's renting for Y. You don't want that. You want to verify it with the county, the housing authority program, and make sure that what they're telling you is renting for, or they show on the lease agreement, is actually true, not falsified. Also, if manager is avoiding that address, they hesitate about the street and they are just dragging their feet to give you what you need on that property, it might be because they don't like the streets, or they don't like that property, or they probably have some history of that property and they're just not comfortable with it. Also, property major repair system, like your new HVAC, new roof, foundation is gone, or electrical issue, I probably will not buy that property. I'll move on to the next one. Also, you are counting any side money. Residents offer to pay you extra money outside of the approved lease amount by the HAP contract, which is Housing Authority program contract that you sign. I will not take that. You should definitely stop and verify or avoid it carefully. All right, here are good growth flag that you should definitely proceed to buy that property or approve that Section 8 tenant. This makes your strategy even a lot stronger. There is a solid workforce workforce in that area that you are looking to buy that property, or that tenant is, or that where your property is located, it means you have a stable rental demand. There will be decent blocks, and good property manager are willing to, confidently want to manage your property for you. It could also mean that inspection ready property that you are buying, maybe everything has been fixed, there is no any issue, especially if you're buying a new construction and that area has a lot of Section 8 demand. I will go for that property, and of course, still have to screen the tenant. Now, if you are dealing with an experienced property manager, that can definitely help you a lot, because they know how it works and they can guide you through the process. They can save you all the headache, and you can have a smooth Section 8 landlording experience. Now, these are a few go or no go gates, or a gate that you should definitely, incorporate in your process. The deal must pass this before you commit to buying it. Rent gates, payment standard, you should check for it. Rent reasonableness, manager rent opinion, or if they will not rent it, and do you even have a support for that property? So if it check for you, you should buy it, and if it doesn't, don't go for it. Property gate as well. If you do inspection risk, especially Section 8 specific inspection on that property, if you pass all the things that they're always looking for, and there is no major repair that is needed to be done in the next 1 year, and you are comfortable with the overall property condition, absolutely go for it. And also the reverse is the case. If it doesn't make sense, terminate and walk away. Management gate as well. If you have a voucher experienced property manager that is say you should go for that property, that might be a great sign that you should also buy it. So here are a few execution tools that you can use. You want to use this tool before you buy or you lease to any tenant. Now, you want to make sure that you understand the strategies that you are doing, which is in this case is going to be Section 8. And also you want to use an Excel calculator to analyze any property you're looking to buy, understand the PHA process, understand the inspection readiness, and also, of course, print all your checklists and make sure you're good to go. Congratulations, you are now at the end of this one. I'm happy for you. Make sure you complete your assignment, or if you have any questions, make sure to ask me and I will be able to guide you accordingly. I am super happy for you and I cannot wait to hear your Section 8 rental experience. Thank you so much, and I will see you on the next one.